I was at the bank when it happened. The line had been short for once, and I just handed over my deposit slip to the young teller, Emily. I think when my phone rang in my coat pocket, I glanced at the screen. Trey, I hadn't heard from him in weeks. "Hi, Mom," he said to Chipper. "Just wanted to give you a heads up. We're leaving tomorrow. Everything's set. Oh, and I already sold your jewelry in the cabin. Bye." It came out clean, like he was reading a list. I didn't flinch, not even a blink. I kept my voice even. One more account, under Ashford. I told Emily, who nodded and turned to her computer. Then I lifted the phone to my ear again and said, "Clear as day. You forgot one thing." He hung up before asking, "What?" The screen went dark in my hand. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Ashford, my maiden name. The name no one had used in nearly 40 years. Not since I married Dean and took his. But there were still some things, some accounts left in that name. Quiet, untouched, and absolutely mine. Emily handed back my receipt. "Will that be all, Mrs. Miss Ashford?" I smiled at her. "That's all for today. Outside." The wind bit through my jacket, but I walked slow. The car was warm, but I sat in silence before starting it. Hands on the wheel, mind steady. It wasn't the shock that struck me. It was the clarity. My son had drawn his line. All that remained was how I'd choose to respond, not with shouting, not with begging, with precision. Back home, I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter, turned on the kettle, and pulled out a file folder from the back of the drawer. The label was simple, just one word: contingency. I set the folder on the kitchen table next to a half-used legal pad and a pen that still bore Dean's company logo. Before anything else, I walked past the folded walker by the hallway wall. I hadn't needed it in weeks, but I hadn't put it away either. Maybe part of me had been waiting for something or someone to prove I still needed support. Apparently not. I filled the kettle and turned it on. While the water heated, I opened the folder. Inside were copies of trust documents, property records, and insurance policies. Dean had been meticulous about documentation. After his passing, I'd kept everything filed and updated, not because I didn't trust Trey, but because I'd lived long enough to know that trust without proof was a luxury. The cabin was still under the Ashford Family Trust. No sale could go through without my signature. No transfer, no escrow, nothing. And the jewelry, 2 brooches, 1 sapphire ring, and a pearl necklace was fully insured under my name, with serial numbers and recent appraisals. I picked up the phone and called Carl Vincent. He was retired technically, but still picked up if he saw my number. "Marlene." His voice was soft, familiar. "I believe my son forged documents," I said plainly, "and I'd like to know what my options are." There was a long pause and then a sigh. "You want me to dig?" "I want to know what's been filed in the last 60 days. Property, power of attorney, anything. I'll call you back tomorrow." I thanked him, hung up, and let the silence settle. The kettle whistled. I poured the water over chamomile and watched the steam curl above the cup. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I felt something colder, a tightening, a readiness. Trey thought he'd taken what was mine. He'd forgotten I never signed anything. I carried the tea to the table and opened the second folder, the one with the maps. The old Timberland records were still there, untouched since 1993. Carl called 2 days later, his voice graver than usual. "You were right to ask," he said. "I found a deed transfer, notarized, but the notary is based in Portland, nowhere near the county office that supposedly filed it. You ever meet a Denise Kramer? Never heard of her. I said she notarized your signature on the cabin transfer. Sloppy job, too. Ink doesn't match, and the timestamp is off by a full day from the filing date. I didn't respond right away. I just pulled a pen from the drawer and started writing down the name. Denise Kramer. I'd look into her later," Carl continued. "There's more. A bill of sale for several jewelry pieces. It's labeled as irretrievable loss. Likely to get around the insurance tracking, but the buyer's ledger links back to a dealer downstate who logs serial numbers. Do they match mine? 2 do. The ring and 1 brooch." I let out a quiet breath. Steady. And the cabin. I asked under pending escrow buyers, a real estate development firm expanding lakeside properties. They haven't cleared payment yet, but they're close. Of course they were. Trey always knew how to push a timeline, just not how to protect himself from it. Carl hesitated. Do you want to press charges? Not yet, I said. Marlene, I want him to think he's winning. Carl didn't argue. He knew me well enough not to. After we hung up, I sat back and stared at the same envelope that had once carried the original trust deed. The corners were soft with time, but the meaning still held. Trey had reached into something he didn't understand. I wasn't going to stop him. Not yet. I pulled out my planner and jotted down 3 names. Carl's contact for the buyer, the insurance agent, and the notary. Below them, I added one more, Horizon Timber Holdings. It was time to visit the other bank. The drive to North Valley Bank took nearly an hour. I hadn't been there since the winter after Dean died. It sat just off a quiet highway, wedged between a post office and a farm supply store. Nothing about the place looked different, which was exactly why I'd chosen it all those years ago. The manager had changed, but the vault hadn't. My signature and key were enough. Inside the deposit box were the things I'd hoped I'd never need. The original Ashford Family Trust, complete with Dean's handwritten annotations in the margins. 3 unmarked checkbooks tied to Horizon Timber Holdings, an LLC registered under my maiden name with a P.O. box in another county. Trey had never asked about that company. He'd never noticed the land we never sold. And tucked beneath the folder was an envelope with Dean's writing on the front. If Trey forgets who you are. I opened it carefully inside. 1 line. Use this to protect your peace. You've earned it. It wasn't anger that welled up. It was something quieter, a kind of thankfulness for the man who'd seen this coming. Even when I hadn't wanted to believe it, I packed everything neatly back into the box except 1 checkbook. That one I carried to the counter. I'd like to open a new account. I told the clerk under the name Ashford. She nodded, no questions asked. Afterward, I called Carl and wired a retainer to his office. Use it how you see fit. I told him by time. Hire a clerk. File a hold, whatever we need. Back in the car. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled. This wasn't revenge. It was arithmetic. Balance. I turned south toward home, but passed my street without turning. Instead, I drove farther toward the lake road. The sky was dimming, and I knew the cabin would be dark, but I wanted to see it one more time before Trey tried again. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sky had slipped into that muted late evening blue that makes every house look softer than it really is. Mine wasn't soft tonight. Music drifted from the back deck. Something upbeat, something loud, and the smell of wine drifted through the open kitchen window. I stepped inside quietly. The lights were on, but no one noticed me. They were too busy outside. Through the sliding glass door, I could see Trey and Lauren standing among half-packed boxes, holding glasses of red wine like they were toasting the end of a long chapter. 2 of their friends lounged in chairs, laughing at something on a phone screen. Lauren tipped her glass toward the boxes. "It's done," she said brightly. "The money hits in 48 hours and we're out." Trey clinked his glass against hers. "She won't even know it's missing." One of their friends snickered. "You sure she's not going to?" "She's old," Lauren cut in. "She barely checks her own mail." They all laughed. I didn't step forward. I didn't slam a door or clear my throat or ask why the people I raised thought I was too frail to notice theft. I simply watched them bask in what they believed was certainty. Then I turned away. In the quiet of my room, I called Carl. It needs to happen tonight. He didn't ask what changed. "I'll file a freeze on the escrow." He said it'll hit the buyer system by morning. When I hung up, I walked to the kitchen sink and let the water run over my hands. Cold, but steadying outside. I heard another burst of laughter, glasses clinking again as if they had already left this house behind. I dried my hands, turned off the light, and went to bed while they celebrated their escape. I waited for the moment they would try to take the next step and find the ground gone beneath them. By morning, Carl had already sent the notice. He'd spoken with the buyer's attorney before sunrise, citing fraud, forged documents, and pending investigation. The sale was halted. The escrow firm backed out immediately. No payment, no closing, and no deal per contract terms. The deposit was forfeited. An hour later, the front door shook under Trey's fists. I didn't answer. I heard him outside, pacing, cursing. Then a silence stretched out, the sound of a car door slamming, then nothing. I waited 5 more minutes, then picked up my keys. The drive to the cabin was short, but it felt different now. Not a place of retreat, a place I needed to reclaim. When I pulled up the gravel path, the front porch looked exactly as it had months ago, slightly sagging, still solid. No signs of intrusion. The lock clicked open with the same old key inside. The air was stale and still. There were no moving boxes, no signs of staging, just the dust of disuse and the quiet of something left alone too long. I walked the room slowly, running my hand along the old table Dean had carved, the worn banister on the staircase. Nothing had been touched. Trey had tried to sell it without ever setting foot inside. In the study, I opened the bottom drawer of the desk. There they were. Dean's original sketches, floor plans, renderings, notes written in his all-caps handwriting. The vision he'd had when he built this place with his own hands. He'd kept them here like a blueprint for memory. I took one sketch and rolled it carefully, slipped it into my bag. This cabin wasn't theirs. It never had been. As I backed out of the driveway, my phone buzzed. It was Carl. A short text. Insurance investigator ready. Want to meet tomorrow. By noon the next day, I heard her outside. Lauren was shouting through the front door, voice sharp and too loud for the quiet street. "You're punishing your own son. Do you even hear yourself?" I waited until she stopped banging. Then I opened the door. She stood there, arms crossed, fury tight in her throat. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm correcting a mistake." Her mouth opened like she might argue, but I stepped back and handed her an envelope. Inside notice of revoked permission to occupy, proof of title, and a formal cease and desist. Carl had made sure it was worded with precision. The locks had already been changed that morning. I closed the door gently, turned the deadbolt, and walked to the back room, what they used to call their office. It was empty now. I opened the window and let the air run through. The moving truck pulled up at 3. Lauren must have thought it was for them. She watched from across the street, arms folded like she was waiting for a concession, but the crew went straight to the side of the house. My side, my books, my easel, my grandmother's chest, labeled and wrapped exactly as I'd packed them. I didn't look back when I left. The new place was smaller, tucked near a quiet river trail. I'd found it the week Trey called. I hadn't known then that I'd need it. I just liked the morning light through the east-facing windows. That afternoon, I set up my art room in the corner, unrolled Dean's sketch, and hung it above the shelf, opened the old box of brushes I hadn't touched in nearly a year. The bristles were stiff, but not ruined. I dipped one into the water and waited. When I finally moved it across the canvas, my hand didn't shake. Later that evening, Carl called again. "There's more." He said, "In flagged the claim, they want to meet, and they've called in the state investigator." Carl didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, the paperwork was filed. Forgery for the falsified deed to the cabin, complete with a fake notary's stamp. Insurance fraud for the false claim of lost jewelry that had been quietly sold to a dealer who recorded everything. Attempted escrow fraud for initiating a real estate transfer without legal right to do so. He listed Lauren as a co-conspirator. Her signature appeared on the submission documents to the escrow company. She'd sworn under penalty of perjury that everything was truthful and lawful. It wasn't. Local investigators opened a case. The sheriff's office took statements. Carl handed over copies of the trust documents, the insurance appraisal, and a sworn affidavit from me, signed and notarized properly. This time, by the end of the week, Trey received official notice. 2 bank accounts frozen. A pending investigation into financial fraud. The real estate firm had pulled out entirely and threatened litigation. The jewelry dealer, sensing trouble, volunteered receipts. That's when Trey called. I let the phone ring twice before answering. "You ruined us," he shouted. "You really went through with it, you sick, bitter old. I didn't ruin you," I said quietly. "But you might have." There was a pause heavy on the line. "I was fixing things," he muttered. "You don't understand. We needed you forged my name," I said. "You sold what didn't belong to you, and you lied." I heard him breathing hard through the receiver. "You always made me feel small," he said finally. "I never made you feel anything." I replied, "You decided who you were, and now so have I." He hung up. I placed the phone back on the table and didn't touch it again that night. Outside, the river moved slow and steady past the house in my new studio. The canvas waited. I dipped the brush again. "Tomorrow," Carl said. "I'd be hearing from the state investigator personally. They wanted to meet in person. They were bringing documents and questions." Weeks passed. The case moved slowly, like all things involving paperwork and pride. Carl kept me updated. No formal charges yet, but the investigators weren't letting go. The escrow firm wanted damages. The insurance company wanted answers. Everyone else wanted distance. And then one afternoon, an envelope arrived. Handwritten? No return address, but I knew the slanted loops and inconsistent spacing. Trey. The letter inside was short, awkward, spelled like someone who'd stopped trusting pens years ago. "I'm sorry. I thought I was owed something. I didn't realize I was burning the last bridge. Lauren's gone. Took her things and left the rest for me to clean up. The debts are mine. I know that now. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I want to do things differently, if I still can." He didn't ask for help, didn't ask for money. It would have been easier if he had. I sat with the letter for hours, read it twice, then again. I thought about the times I'd driven him to summer jobs, packed lunchboxes with notes inside, the late-night calls when he didn't know how to file his taxes, or when Lauren had locked herself in the car after one of their fights. I thought about all the things I gave him, and all the things he believed he deserved, and still, he didn't ask for anything. Now I opened a drawer and pulled out a card. No return address. Just my maiden name again. Simple, sharp, familiar. I wrote one line. "There's still one thing of yours. I protected your name. Use it differently." I sealed the envelope before I could second-guess it, dropped it in the mail. The next morning, the studio felt quiet after that. I turned on the radio, opened the window to let in the sound of the water outside. That afternoon, I started a new piece. Bolder colors, broader lines, and later that week, the realtor called. The offer on the timberland had come through. The studio sits just off the main road, tucked between an old bookstore and a bakery that opens at dawn. I kept the sign. Simple Ashford Studio. Nothing more. The name fits again. I teach once a week, just enough to keep the brushes wet, the chairs warm, and the shelves full of paint jars no one ever puts back in the right place. Teenagers come on Wednesdays, retirees on Fridays. Some talk, some don't. I let the silence speak if it wants to. On the front wall, I framed the sketch I'd taken from the cabin, the one Dean drew the year we built it. Below it hangs the cabin's original deed, stamped and certified with my name in bold at the bottom. Between them, a handwritten line framed in plain pine property isn't just land. Sometimes it's your dignity. People pause at it, some read it twice, a few smile like they understand. In the mornings, before anyone arrives, I sit by the wide window facing the lake. The light shifts slowly across the wood floors. The kind of slow that reminds you time doesn't ask permission, it just moves. And yet, for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm waiting for the next loss. I don't feel watched. I feel home. The past hasn't vanished. The cabin still stands. Trey still exists wherever he is now, whatever version of himself he's trying to become. I didn't write again. I didn't need to. Some days I imagine him walking by the studio, pausing at the name on the sign, maybe wondering if that name still has room for him inside. But that's not my story to write anymore. Mine is simpler now. Canvas tea soft light on maple floors, a quiet place to remember who I was before I ever had to defend myself. That evening, as I wiped down the brushes and closed the front door, I glanced once more at the framed deed on the wall, and then I turned off the nights.